Hello, sixth graders. Here we are again. I hope everybody's doing okay. We are going to learn how to solve multiplication and division equations. This equation here is a multiplication equation. 3 times x, remember if that was an m or a t or a z, it would still be multiplying. When you don't have a sign, it's multiplying. And this equation, x divided by 3 equals 12, is obviously a division equation. The tricky part here is you don't see a sign. You don't see the division sign, so you have to remember that this is the division sign. You don't see a multiplication sign, so you have to remember that when you have a coefficient in front of a variable that it's multiplying. So again, your signs are opposite. In order to solve a multiplication equation, you're going to divide, and I will show you how to do that in a second. In order to solve a division equation, you're going to do the opposite. You're going to multiply, and you'll see some of those. All right, so here we go. Now, the first thing you got to pay attention to is don't forget to read the directions. It says, what should we do to both sides of the equation to isolate the variable? Get the variable by itself. Remember, that's your goal, to isolate the variable. So ask yourself, what is this? What kind of an equation is this? Well, it's division. So you have to multiply to undo it or to isolate the variable. So click on divide, or excuse me, click on multiply. All right, then you see parentheses pop up on both sides of the equation. They do it just like I would do it also. I put it in the front of the t and I put it after the 6. I put it at the end and at the beginning so that I wish I could cover this up. You still have the equation here in the middle. Okay, so that flashing number is what you're going to multiply by. Unfortunately, it's a negative number, so use your calculators. Don't worry about that part. Don't worry about, I don't get why negative times negative is positive. It's the best we can do here. Okay, so that flashing number is what you want to type in here because you want to multiply both sides of the equation by -6. You have to treat them fairly, so you have to do the same thing to both sides. So remember, that flashing number is the number you're going to use. Unfortunately, they just give you these parentheses, so you don't have to think so much about it, but remember that that means, hey, I'm multiplying this side by -6 and this side by -6. And if you were canceling out, you could cross this out, divide by -6, and get a 1 and a 1, like we did when we canceled out fractions. And then that would leave you with just t there. Okay, so check this step. Again, you're left with just t, so simplify the left side of the equation. When you cancel those two out, if they were 6 and 6, it might be easier to see, but if you cancel those two out, you're going to get t. And on the other side, do the math. It says 6 plus 6, -6, 6 minus -6, 6 times -6, 6 divided by -6. It says 6 times -6. Again, no sign. So +6 times +6 would be +36. So +6 times -6 is going to be -36. Again, use your calculator on that. Don't use the minus sign. Use the negative sign. They are two different signs on your calculator. And check that step. Again, if you get glitches, just reload, start again. Hopefully we get a multiplication equation on this one. No, we get another division equation. So how do you solve a division equation? You multiply. Again, you want to isolate the variable, get the variable by itself, and you want to do that by multiplying both sides by this number. So we're going to multiply by this number. We're going to multiply by 2, and that's going to give us 2b on the left side. On the right side, that's going to give us 7 times 2. Again, you have to do the exact same thing on both sides. Check this step, and if you cancel those out, cancel that out, put a 1, cancel that out, put a 1, and you're left with b. So you've simplified the left side of the equation. Over here, very simply, it says 7 times 2, and you know that that equals 14. My favorite number. Another division equation. So how do we solve a division equation? We multiply, they're opposites, and you multiply by that number. So if you multiply this side by -2, that's going to give you -2y for a second, divided by -2. And if you multiply that side by -2, you have to multiply the right side by -2. Remember, that tells you you're multiplying both sides. Cancel those two out, and you're left with y equals negative times negative is positive, and 4. And I don't believe they like signs on this. Let me see. Oh, they were okay with that positive sign, so no big deal. Another division equation. How do you solve division? You multiply. In this case, we're going to multiply by 4. 4c divided by 4 equals 6 times 4. Cancel that out. You're left with 1 and 1 times c is c. The other side very simply says 6 times 4, and that is 24. Notice I'm not getting any glitches. I believe it's because of Chrome updates, so beware of that. Haha, we got a multiplication equation. So negative 4 times b equals 20. The opposite of multiplication is division, and how do we show division? With that fraction line that you've been seeing on the previous questions. So we're going to divide, and they're going to put the division line in there, the fraction line. What are we going to divide by? Everything that's in front of that variable, the coefficient, even if it's negative. So you got to be careful with that. You're going to divide by that number in that red box. So when you start doing this on your own, you have to remember to divide by a negative number if it's negative. If I divide by negative 4 on one side, I have to divide by negative 4 on the other. Cancel those out. It's pretty easy to see there that those two would just, negative 4 divided by negative 4 would be equal to 1, because any number divided by itself is 1. So you're going to be left with b. Could write 1b, but just left with b. And that says, on the other side, positive divided by negative is negative. Again, use your calculator. And you know that 20 divided by 4 is 5. So b equals negative 5. And if you plug that back in, negative 4 times negative 5 equals positive 20. If you do that on your calculator, you'll find that it is true. Another division problem. So we're going to multiply to undo it. Multiply by that number that is with the variable. You want to get rid of that number so you can isolate it, isolate the variable. So you multiply both sides of the equation by negative 4. If you do that, cancel these two out, you're left with t equals, it's going to be negative. Again, use your calculator. 13 times 4 is 52. And it's giving me a glitch here. There we go. Okay, so negative 2 times c equals negative 2. It's a multiplication equation, so I'm going to divide to solve it, and they're going to give you the fraction lines. Okay, you got to write those under there. A little different than when you add or subtract or solve an addition or subtraction equation. All right, so we're going to divide by that coefficient, and that coefficient is negative 2. Divide by negative 2 on both sides. Cancel those out. I wish I could cover them up. You're left with c equals, and any number divided by itself equals 1, I hope you said on the other side. Another division equation, so we're going to multiply to undo it. They're going to put the parentheses in telling you to multiply by something on both sides, and you're going to multiply by that number that you're dividing by so that you can get rid of it. Okay, you want to get rid of that number that's with the variable, just like we did when we solved addition and subtraction equations. You're going to multiply both sides by 5. Cancel those out, and that leaves you with c. And that says negative 3 times 5. Well, 3 times 5 is positive 15, so negative 3 times 5 is going to be negative 15. Plug it in. Negative 5 times, or excuse me, ignore that. Negative 15 divided by 5 would equal negative 3. Good. Multiplication equation. How do we undo it? We divide. We do the opposite. And they're going to draw those fraction lines. Divide by the coefficient. And in this case, the coefficient is a positive number, so we're going to divide by that coefficient. We're going to divide by that 2. Enter the number to divide both sides of the equation. Left with v if you cancel those two out, and that says 6 divided by 2. You want to do that math. 6 divided by 2 is simply 3. Plug it in. Ignore this stuff down here. 2 times 3 equals 6. Going to multiply by negative 3. on both sides. I'm not going to say anything for a little bit. I'm going to let you think about it. Think about what you're going to type in that box. Hopefully you decided on -3 because that's the number that's with the variable, and -3 on that side because you have to treat both sides of the equal sign fairly. Both sides of the equation fairly. Cancel those out. You're left with 1's in their place and left with a y. And -2 times -3 is +6. 6 divided by -3 would leave you with -2. Well, here we go again. Undo division by multiplying. They're going to give you the parentheses that show the multiplication. You're going to multiply by that number that's with the variable. Multiply both sides by 5. That leaves you with a equals 3 times 5, so a equals 15. 15 divided by 5 equals that 3. What kind of an equation is this? 8 times b, so it's a multiplication equation. We're going to divide. We're going to do the opposite to solve it. And what are we going to divide by? That coefficient. We're going to divide by that 8 that is with the b. So divide by 8 there, divide by 8 there, treat both sides fairly. Cancel those out. That leaves you with b equals 16 divided by 8 is 2. Be careful that you divide there, don't subtract. I get a lot of 8's here as wrong answers. 16. Say it to yourself, 16 divided by 8 is 2. Division equation, so you multiply to undo it. Multiply by what? Multiply by 6 on both sides because you want to get rid of that number. I know it's flashing at you, but you got to recognize that you want the variable by itself. Eventually, you're going to be doing this on paper. You want to get rid of that number. So multiply by it on both sides. And that very simply leaves you with r equals 2 times 6, which is 12. Come on, give me a multiplication equation. Multiply to undo it. Multiply by what? The number that is with the variable on the same side of the equation as the variable. And in this case, that's -7. Cancel those out. As any number divided by itself is 1, and that would leave you with 1a, but we just want to type a equals, that's going to be negative, and 7 times 6 is 42. Now remember, you can pause this, you can watch it again and again, do whatever you need to do. Ha! A tricky one. Here you have to think opposites. You really don't have to do much to solve this. Anyway, for now, I'm just going to show you the easy way to do this. You just have to remember how to do it. We don't want -s. All along, we have solved for a positive variable. Well, the relationship between s and -s is that they are opposites. So what we're going to do is we're going to find the opposite on this side, and what you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. So we're going to find the opposite on this side. So the opposite of -s is s. The opposite of -11 is 11. Now they're going to walk you through it a little differently, but that's an easy way to solve that problem. All right, so they're going to say that we need to multiply both sides by -1, I believe. Oh, guess not. We have to divide. Okay, so we have to divide by -1. You could also multiply by -1. So again, you don't see a 1 there, but you could write 1 in. So we're going to divide by -1. That allows us to get rid of the negative sign. And again, that leaves you with the s, because if you divide negative by negative, you get a positive, and that's why we divided by -1. Negative divided by negative there is going to be positive, and 11 divided by 1 is 11. Now that's a tricky one. Again, you might just want to think about finding the opposite here, finding the opposite here. You get the same answer. Multiply to undo it. Multiply by that number that is by the 2. Multiply by the y. Multiply by 2 on both sides. Cancel those 2's out, and that leaves you with a y. And that gives you -8. Don't